So today is very well for this next 45 minutes. We're gonna take you to a journey with Lindsay and explore with you, alongside you. You can share us about your journey because you also are doing very interesting things in terms of human-centric workspaces, human-centric everyday work. So I just I have some questions, of course, prepared. However, how we spoke earlier is going to be conversational. The idea is to have it to understand the whys of what you are doing, but also how can we all also do like our parts from whatever we're working with. And if there's like this courage of, you know what, these systems are not working for me, these systems can be changed. And I know other people that want to do it as well. So how do we sum up?
Sounds like a good plan.
Yes, but okay, Lindsay, welcome.
Thank you.
So for those of you that don't know, Lindsay, she is the founder of The Lamp. And The Lamp is a human-centric co-working space. If I present it correctly, maybe you are going to tell us more about the story of it. It's a space that highlights the importance of human sustainability. So it has been a long journey for The Lamp and you exploring this topic. But let's take it a step back. And we want to know first about you, how you started, maybe how you end up here in Sweden. How did your journey start even before Sweden? But walk us through. Who is Lindsay?
That is a great question. Thanks for having me here. I'm very honored that you wanted to talk to me and hear the story and everything. And I'm going to do my best to make sure that it provides value. So I've been in Sweden now for 14 years. I'm American. You can hear that from my voice. And probably you'll notice from all my giant hand gestures as well. Originally from outside Philadelphia. And I knew from the age of 12 that I wanted to be a journalist. Don't ask me how this happened, but I ended up being the newscaster, I think that's a pretty generous term at 12, for something called the Arcola News Journal, which was a TV show that we had every morning in our middle school. And I was 12 and a female, so absolutely giant next to the little Tom Arnold that I was presenting with. And we would do the news and we would do interviews. I believe Kermit the Frog was interviewed at one point. Very hard-hitting journalism that we were doing. But there was something in me, I can't explain why, it was something that I was drawn to for a really long time. And then at some point in high school, I convinced myself that I shouldn't be a journalist because journalists make no money and they have absolutely no control over their careers. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go into politics instead. Now I'm going to reveal my advanced age. This was around the time of the 2001 election, George Bush and Al Gore fighting in the Supreme Court. It was all very exciting and sexy and very interesting. And for a young 18-year-old who really wanted to go out and beat the world and make change, it felt like, yes, this is what I want to do. I ended up going to university in Washington, D.C. I was at George Washington University. I was a political science major, but only for 1 year. Because I very quickly discovered that politics is not what I wanted to do. I was a volunteer on, they used to film CNN's Crossfire. I don't know if you guys know that show. It was 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats that would face off against each other and argue about politics. And I was a volunteer, so I'd seat people in the audience. And I sat at the back of that room every night and just went, over my dead body. I'm not doing this. This is awful. This is not productive. This is not what is going to move our discussion forward, us just fighting each other and arguing our talking points. So then I decided, you know what, journalism is actually the only way to go here. And I ended up transferring to Ohio State University, where they had the 7th largest newspaper in the state, which was a daily paper, and became the news editor there. I also did an internship with the Associated Press in London in my 3rd year, and for me that was it. I was done. I mean, they call the Associated Press the velvet coffin for a reason. Once you start working there, you're there till you're dead. Like, that's just how it works. And I loved it. Like the energy, the sense of purpose. You know, I used to sit behind the editors on the desk when they were pulling in stories that were going to go out on the wire, and I would just watch their fingers. I would watch how they would change the lead, how they would change the nut graph, and they would just be doing it so fast. They would be pulling information up, and you're watching this story transform in real time into something that is so incredibly valuable, so easy to understand, and that when put in the hands of a reader becomes something that they can use to understand their world better and to make more informed decisions and be a better citizen. And that was it for me. I was totally hooked. I was like, this is it. AP or die. Like, let's go. And I graduated, and it's like, no one wants to hire a 22-year-old journalism grad. And I had decided I was going to move to New York City. And I was like, it was so funny. This is such a boring aside, and maybe this is not helpful at all, but there used to be a really big newscaster in the United States named Brian Williams before he had to resign in disgrace. And he was my hero before the resignation. And I got to meet him because I was working at a golf club on Nantucket one summer, and he came in, and I was like, you guys, you have to let me serve him. Like, it has to be me. And I was so nervous. I brought his plate to the table with these shaking hands, and I spilled Coke all over the table. It was just as embarrassing as it gets. But I did manage to get my one question to him, which was, Mr. Williams, I am such a fan. What is your advice for a young journalism student? And he was like, move to Iowa. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And he was like, go to a small market, establish yourself, and build your career from there. And I was like, Mr. Williams, thank you so much. And then I moved to New York. And I couldn't get a job, and you know, I was waiting tables at a sushi restaurant in Times Square, and I was sleeping on somebody's futon in Queens with my clothes stacked on a coffee table, and I was working at a magazine for $8 an hour. I mean, like the lowest of the low. But I bumped into a friend of mine who I knew, talk about networking, a friend who I knew from when I was 16, and it turned out her dad was a VP at AP and got me an interview, and I ended up joining the international desk at 24. And through a bunch of, you know, slightly underhanded but well-meaning manipulations, ended up getting onto the editing desk. And from there, got transferred to Bangkok, became one of the youngest supervisors on the Asia Pacific desk, only the night shift, right? The 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. graveyard. And got to edit the most exciting stories coming out of the most exciting news region in the entire world. The Asia Pacific desk covers everything from Kabul and Islamabad to Pyongyang, and you're just taking in all of this wonderful information. And for me, it was the most formative part of my career, I would say, because it was infused with such a sense of purpose. And while journalism is very specific in its field, the repercussions or the things that you learn about why journalism is so important are so applicable across any profession and in any field. And it really is coming back to this idea of creating value, right? The job of a journalist, the only job of a journalist, is to create value for the reader. And so you're constantly thinking about the reader in your mind. In everything you do, every choice you make, what you put in the headline, what you put in the lead, where you put the information, the only thing you're thinking about is what is most valuable for the reader. And that is something that has stayed with me through my career, and it informs every piece of work that I do. And I'm always putting, whether it's not the reader, now it's the customer, I'm always putting myself in those shoes. And I think doing that is such an incredibly valuable practice, and it's one that I've had with me since those days. But then I fell in love with him, and this was 15 years ago, and decided to move to Sweden, and then joined the dark side, and started...
The literal dark side.
The literal... yeah, true, exactly. And I became a communications and marketing consultant, and did that for many years, and worked for a lot of big companies, and sort of, continued this, while I wasn't working as a journalist, I was still continuing on this path of how can How can I take what I know about putting myself in someone else's shoes, and how can I take that perspective that I always have and use that to create value? So I was one of the lead creatives. I was the lead communicator for the IKEA catalog 2 years in a row, the global IKEA catalog. So we were creating the room sets with the designers, you know, and I was very unpopular with the interior designers, because they would go, well, this is going to be beautiful. Like, we're going to put this here and this color and this pillow and this curtain. And I would go, but what is
it functional?
What is this telling the person who's looking at this? What are they supposed to get out of this? And I must have asked that question about 1 million times, and they were all just ready to chuck me out the window at the end. But when you do that, you end up creating work, and you end up creating something that goes so far beyond sort of what you would consider the average, you know, because then the person that is consuming that feels that you've thought about them. They feel that you have considered them. And the only way we make any progress in our work or in our life is if we take into account the real needs and wants of the other people that we rely on and interact with and need to be dependent on in order to make that progress.
Yes, I mean, you know, from what you've said so far, from this journey that you had from Ohio to New York, Bangkok, it's you wouldn't be able to do that if you weren't like courageous enough in terms of
or stupid.
Or so it's like a thin line. No,
it's a very thin line.
It's a very thin line, but it's very like a defining one in terms of the character that you're building. And you know, when you mentioned the story about Mr. Williams, that he gave you an advice that you totally disregarded, even though it's a person that you admired. And so that's a little bit of how we, in a way, how do you say, like, unlearn from the systems that we have in terms of, this is a person that I respect, admire, but you know what? I don't want to do that.
No.
I don't want to do that. And I don't see myself doing that in a small town. I rather be a small fish in a big ocean. Yeah. And because I lived in New York also for some years, and it can become very overwhelming, but at the same time you create your own world, your own dynamic, but it's a place where you can be at the right time, at the right place at the right time, because there's so many interesting people that you can meet there, and random, like the main word is random. Because how you're saying, oh, it's a friend, oh, it turned out to be a VP in this newspaper, this important newspaper. So it's a lot about putting yourself in the moment. When they say about lucky, no, it's not really. It's putting yourself in the place.
But it's also, and I think that is part of it. And then I think there's also about knowing what you want. You know, if I didn't know what I want, I wouldn't have known what to ask for in that moment. I knew what I needed. I needed a foot in the door. Yes. And I had a relationship with this person, and I was able to ask, "Are you willing to help me?" And I think that is the most courageous thing that you can do, is to be willing to ask for what it is that you want or what it is that you need. And that is something that, for whatever reason, I've been able to do that for most of my life. And I think that is also the willingness to sort of listen to a Brian Williams and go, you know what, I'm not going to listen to what you have to say here. But that was also because I knew I had a knowing, I had an intuition, I had a very strong feeling that was not something that was going to make me happy. I also understood that I was taking the harder path, because what he was proposing was the easier path. It was here's less competition, here is more opportunity for a young person to make a mark. And that's what he was trying to warn me against. Going to be a small fish in a big pond is a very hard thing. And I was lucky in a lot of ways that I was able to break through, because a lot of people might not end up doing that. But I think a big part of that was I knew what I wanted, and I also went into it with very open eyes. I knew that the choice that I was making was the harder choice, that it was going to be the one with more resistance. I felt in myself, this is the right choice. I did that check-in with myself, this is the right choice. And knowing that it was going to be harder also meant that the struggles and the suffering that I experienced along the way, and there was a lot of that, I was ready for that. I was expecting that. I wasn't expecting it to be an easy path. So I kind of went into it with like, here's my, I got my battle hat on, and I've got my armor, and I know that this is going to be tough, but I'm ready for that, and I'm ready to do what it takes to do that. And I don't know whether that is something that I have as an inherent trait, or I don't know whether that is also the blind stupidity of a 23-year-old. I think both help. But I kind of went into it eyes wide open that this was not going to be easy, and I was okay with that. And I think that that's also something that's kind of characterized my career and my choices. Giving up that contract in Bangkok and that dream job to move to Sweden, not an easy choice. But for me, I just knew that is not the path of least resistance. The path of least resistance would have been to stay in the velvet coffin, right? And just ride that AP train until the end. But I also knew that doing that would mean trade-offs I wasn't willing to make. Things like having to put my career before my personal life, potentially sacrificing a family or a stable relationship in order to be a journalist, because that is the reality for female journalists. There's not a lot of men who are willing to just pack up and follow their wife around the world while they go and report from war zones. Unfortunately, they're out there, but maybe harder to find.
The face of.
And those were just things. So I looked at the trade-offs, and I think on paper that looks like a really crazy decision to go, I'm going to give up this contract. This was my dream job. I'm going to give it up. I'm going to move to Sweden. I'm going to start all over again. But for me, the calculus was really clear, and it was like, yes, but that comes with trade-offs I'm not willing to accept. So I'm gonna again go in eyes wide open, knowing that I'm choosing a path with more resistance, but I know that that's the right path for me. So there isn't a choice. For me, it didn't feel that way, at least.
And when you're mentioning, it's very important to know what you want in order to have it very clear. And I'm just thinking about your thought process of having very clear, this is what I want, and then, but also let me balance in terms of how does this feel for myself, and what is it that the trade-offs, what is it that I'm sacrificing, what is it that I'm postponing, what is it that I'm prioritizing now. And in that topic of when you are switching, when you're doing these career changes from journalism and all this character building that it did for you to marketing, advertisement, but then you switched and went to entrepreneurship. Talk us about that.
When I started Lamb, or right before I started Lamb, I had a story in my head. I am not an entrepreneur. Like, that was the story in my head. I am not the entrepreneurial type. This is not my personality trait. This is not my skill set. I had tried once before. I'd started a company in 2012 where I had this whole vision of building a platform that would make it easier for younger people to donate to charity. And you do that through storytelling and creating really short, high-quality documentary films that show exactly where the money's going. So I had done a pilot program. We went to Uganda. We did 2 short films. We were sort of on the path. It got into some festivals. It was doing well. And then the idea was to partner with companies that were going to be able to provide the funding for the films and sponsor those projects. Except those things take an enormous amount of time to convince a company to come on board. And I wasn't making any money, or I was making very little money, and I thought, this is going to take forever to build, and I don't have the patience to do it, and I don't think I'm the right person to do it. So I had this story in the back of my head. I am not an entrepreneur. I am not the kind of person that is going to start this. But at the same time as that is going on, I have this idea in my head. After consulting for many years, I decided to go in-house and take a job as head of content with a fintech company. And while I'm working at this company, I'm noticing and I'm observing, right? Maybe call that the journalist in me. And I'm watching what's happening. And I'm looking at this company go from 50 people when I started to close to 300 at the end. And this is in the course of a year and a half. So they're in this incredible scale-up journey. They've got a ton of money behind them. There's a ton of pressure from shareholders, investors. They need to grow. They need to scale. They need to do it now. And this is a journey that I think we can all recognize in the ICT sector. There are a lot of companies that are on this path, that are under an enormous amount of pressure to grow and to grow quickly. And the thing that I was noticing was that there is one casualty when we are on this type of journey as a company, and it's the people. And there's a very simple reason why the people are the casualty, and it's because you are trying to squeeze a gallon of orange juice out of 3 oranges. The math doesn't add up. And not only that, but what we've done is we sort of created our workplaces in order to reflect the machine that we hope it will be. We hope with the machine we hope the company will be, rather than reflecting a place that's built for the people who are actually creating the value. And we have all these very unrealistic ideas about what these people are capable of day after day over these long journeys. And because we have set this up to be a very unrealistic equation, you have casualties. You have people burning out. You have people who are overwhelmed, who are stressed, who are, even if they're not burnt out, they're not sleeping, they're not managing their feelings well, their personal relationships are suffering at work, at home, they're not the parent they wish they were. There's all these consequences. And the way that we kind of get it sold to us is that you get to be a part of this journey, you get to build this incredible thing. But what's not transparent in that equation is the cost and the price that you pay. And you hope that you're one of the ones who is lucky, who doesn't end up burning out, but the likelihood is that either you or somebody around you will burn out. And women are more disproportionately affected by this than men are, because women are often asked to take on other types of unpaid work that is unseen and unnoticed, and that creates an additional burden for them, in addition to the fact that in some homes, not all, we still have a disproportionate share of the work that goes on at home being placed on a woman. So I'm watching all of this happening and I'm going, but there's got to be a better way. There's got to be something that we can do here. And so the idea for LAM started forming in my head, and it got louder and louder and clearer. And I reached a point where I could not continue my journey at that company because it wasn't healthy for me. And I didn't believe in what we were doing anymore, the way that we were doing it anymore. So I left. And I thought, okay, now I'm going to build this. And at the same time, I've got that story in my head. I'm not an entrepreneur. This is not my thing. I can't do this. I've got this idea, and I think, but I have to do that. I have to build this. I have to see what that is. So again, I'm, picking the path with the resistance.
I know that I want this, yes.
But I know that I have to try this. I know that I have to see if there's something here. And there was.
So yesterday during the conference, we came up with all these different statistics and the findings of this research that we did in terms of what's the status of ICT in terms of gender equality in Sweden, in Europe, but here in Sweden. And part of this, like things that were highlighted was, yes, of course, this aspect of this unpaid labor behind the scenes. So this pressure of being in a place for the majority of the women, they're always the minority in rooms and departments. So it's that pressure. So you need to perform because you earn, you feel that that I have to earn my place here. I have to earn my spot here. Earn that or show that I'm capable of doing. So it's this extra pressure all the time, plus this unpaid labor that it can happen at home as well. And how you're referring to, it can be sometimes it's more acute in some households than in others, culturally as well here in Sweden, even though we think that we are it's high ranked in the world of being in gender equality, but there's still this gap. But when you mention in terms of, human sustainability, human-centric work environments, And you mentioned that this, in the aspect of well-being and burnout, women are more disproportionately affected by it. Can you explain a little bit more of how was the journey of understanding this problem, and what was the way that you prioritize in terms of this is the areas that can have most impact in terms of improving this situation? If you guide us through of that concept for the lamp.
Sure. I mean, right, every great business idea starts with a hypothesis that needs to be tested, right? So even bad business ideas. So the hypothesis that I started with was that there are certain things that we know. We know that there are a few key things that we human beings need to thrive, right? And it's, largely mirrors Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you want to. There's sort of the things at the bottom that we absolutely need to take care of, and for everybody in this room, those are things that we sort of are definitely taking for granted, definitely taken care of, and in some cases taken for granted. food, shelter, water, safety, like a roof over our heads, we have clothes on our backs, all these things. And then there's other things that we need, as you move up, there's a sense of love and belonging and things like that. But then there's other parts which are, we need the opportunity to be able to function in a way that is in line with the way that we're built, right? A human being is a machine. And like any machine, if you use the machine in the wrong way and you overwork it, it's going to break down. But if you use the machine in the way that it's designed to be used, then you will get the most out of that. That machine will thrive. The machine will be more creative and better at solving problems and things like that. So there's a lot of science behind this. The needs that we have for being able to manage stress, the needs we have for rest and a good night's sleep and a healthy diet and exercise and a healthy connection with the people that we work with and all these other things. These are all part of the well-being ecosystem of what we need in order to thrive as people. But in a workplace, those things are almost completely ignored because we have a belief that sitting at our desk for 8 hours a day is what is going to make us productive. And there's an abundant amount of science out there that shows that we are not capable of working for 8 hours straight. We are only capable of being productive maybe 4 hours a day. And those bouts of productivity need to be broken up by bouts of rest and by breaks and by having a meaningful conversation with somebody or moving our body, and that we need these very tangible tools to be able to manage stress, because when we do get into these challenging situations, if we have those tools, we're able to overcome this and we're able to continue to maintain those energy levels that we have. So when we started LAM, the idea was you have a major tool in the office. Right? You have a physical environment, and it influences the way that we behave. It influences every decision we make about what we do, what we don't do, what we're allowed to do, what's okay, what's permissible, what's not okay, what's not encouraged. And then you have, in addition to that, an office that is filled with people, and we're pack animals, and our only, the core need of every human being on the planet is to be accepted by a group. That is our evolutionary and
sense of belonging.
Yeah, we need that to survive, and that is what we're all seeking all the time. So the hypothesis was, okay, you have this tool that's not really exploited very much, this office, and you have these people, and we're all influencing each other all the time. But in most of our work environments, it's usually negative because we don't really understand a lot of the ways that we're interacting with each other, and we kind of end up with these toxic habits that impact our work and that lower our performance, and instead of enhancing our performance and giving us the tools. Now, work can be an amazing place, and it can be an incredible place for connection and growth, but that has to be something that is intentionally built for and intentionally created. So I had the big, crazy, hairy idea of opening a space during a pandemic, and then all of the things that came after that. But what we did was we said we're going to create a space, and we're going to engineer this space so that it has all of the different things that we need to thrive during the day, but we're going to build it into the environment. We're going to make it as easy as humanly possible for people to be able to use these tools, And we're going to create a community around it that is going to encourage people to make healthy choices. And we're going to subtly nudge people towards that behavior using the design of the physical space and using really clear communication in terms of expectations and boundaries. And we're going to, this is going to be a normal work environment, and we're not going to distract from anybody's every day, but we're going to create these subtle opportunities for people to be able to meet these very basic human needs during the workday. And what we discovered was that it was incredibly powerful. We surveyed our members in the spring, and 77% of them said that they had lower stress levels when they compared LAM to other workspaces. 64% were more engaged with their work, which was an incredible metric when you consider that everybody was working for their own companies. 64%, what was the other figure? Now I'm blanking. 64% said that their productivity improved, and 80% of the people who were working in the space adopted at least one new healthy habit that they had permanently added to their routine. So
these moments of nudging, that like everyday small things throughout the day, they sum up and overall help their performance, productivity.
Their performance, their productivity, their relationships with other people, their energy. I mean, I think one of the most telling sort of testimonials that we had was, and this was sort of the vision from the beginning, and so this was at the end. We recently closed the space just a month ago because of financial challenges in the current environment. But one of the members who had been with us for a very long time said, you know, one thing that I've noticed since I've been at LAM is that when I go home, I have more energy to be with my kids, and I'm more patient. I'm not snapping with them, and I'm having better conversations with my partner because I'm going home with energy. And for me, that really summarized a big point of all this, that to me, it was unthinkable that we could go through our work lives and spend every day feeling like we had given everything to our work and come home completely depleted with nothing left to give to the most important part of our life. And that to me was heartbreaking, and that was a big motivation but how can we use an existing system that we have and tweak it in a way that's going to work for people without disrupting the overall system? We're still working within the system. It's still recognizable, the system that we understand, but we're tweaking it in a way to work for us instead of against us.
That in itself, it's so valuable in terms of, it can be such like turning point in terms of going into your work experience every day, because how you're saying it's our everyday life. It's most of the time that we spend in offices, and then just the fact to go back home, and then when you're thinking of, okay, I'm gonna go back home and relax and everything, or that you're saying I don't want to do anything. What if throughout the day is like you're productive, but still with a mind, being mindful or in peace, not stressed?
Well, I think it's, you know, where there's actual tools that when you engage with it and you use it, you're getting a little bit of energy back. Right? Imagine you have an electric car and you have 100% battery charge. Throughout the day, that battery is going to go down. And the way that we're accustomed to working is letting that battery go down and down and down until maybe you have this much left at the end of the day, if anything. And I think the point is that we can build our work environments in a way where that battery has an opportunity to recharge a little bit throughout the day, so that you're not draining it and not depriving yourself or your family or the people that you care about of the best of you, or yourself of the best of you, because you don't have the energy. And we're just simply not designed to work like that. We're not designed to just drain that battery down to zero and then hope that a great night's sleep is going to recharge us. That's just not how physiologically we're designed. We need rest. We need breaks during the day. We need to move our bodies. We need to eat good food. We need to have great conversations with other people. We need to have those opportunities, and they're not going to happen by accident. And so if we can build our work environment, this is what we did at LAM. If you build the work environment in order to encourage that, and you're really clear, this environment is for that. This retreat room versus like a vilorum, which we normally have in Sweden, is designed for you to use it, right? This was one of the, I shared this in our group when we were talking to Shana. One of the worst and most horrifying conversations I've ever had was with a business leader who worked for a company, and they had a vilorum because it's, you know, you all know what a vilorum is, a rest room in Sweden, right? And you all know what they look like, right? Like a hospital waiting room, like a closet. I remember the one at the fintech that I worked for was inside a locked storage closet off to the side. So in order to get in there, you had to go to the office manager, and they would be like, "Why do you want to go there?" And you'd be like, "I don't know, to cry." So I was talking to this leader, and they said, "Yeah, we have a vilorum, but we designed it in a way so that people don't want to use it." Because in their mind, people using the vilorum would hurt productivity. And the nuttiest part about this whole thing is that break that person would take is what drives their productivity, is what drives their creativity, their ability to solve problems in a novel way, their ability to relate to their coworkers in a productive and healthy way that moves the company forward. And this type of, you have this incredible tool. You have an office, you're investing in it, you are spending tons of money on it, everybody's here all the time, every day, maybe not so much now, but why aren't we using it? And that's what we did at LAM, and I think that at the end of the day, we can talk about productivity, and we can talk about performance, and we can talk about all these other these value adds that you get from working this way. But I think that ultimately what it's about is you are spending your day in an environment where the key message is, this was built for you. This was built so you can do the things you need to care for you. And the transformation that happens for people, and this is what we've seen in member after member after member at LAM, the transformation that happens in people when they work in an environment where the primary message is, we care about you, we care about how you feel, we care that you are doing well, it changes everything. All of a sudden, you have a completely different level of engagement. You have a completely different person in front of you. You have somebody who feels seen and accepted. They feel a sense of belonging. They feel, I am important. And then that creates a willingness to give and to be generous back. And that creates an incredible cycle that I think every company would want to see in their work environment.
And it carries throughout the day. It carries not only with the person, but how you're saying, the colleagues. It carries, like, because one person, it's a whole family behind. So afterwards at home, you know, when, now that you mentioned that, I mean, at the LAMP, you, in a way, did a whole lab. Because in terms of, you were testing this way that of saying that, yes, we can change this, the status quo of working environments, and we can improve it. There's space to improve it. People want it, and what you saw, how you're saying, this is what I want to do. How do I add value? How do I add value all the time? How you're saying with your members, make them feel that this is for you to be more productive, but also we're thinking of your well-being. We're thinking that this is gonna create better human connections, better quality of just the work that each one of you are doing. And just a side note, so Lindsay and I spoke before, so some of LAM members came here, and when they saw the space, oh, nice, and everything, and then when they saw, do you have this, I'm like, no. They're like, oh, so disappointed. And I'm like, oh, you guys spoiled all your members. I'm like, oh, I need to speak with Lindsay and Dennis. See what? So spoiled. See, like we need to upgrade our game.
We can help.
Yes. And you know, and thinking of this aspect of this huge responsibility that like space owners and people like us that Impact Hub, for example, I'm speaking that we have 110 locations all over the world, and we're thinking of yes, it's people that are the majority of our members and the partners and the people that attend our programs are people that are working to make a better place in any way. It can be social sustainability, environmental, creating companies, working for companies, organizations, and the thing is that they are working for this. However, what's the quality of them in terms of during their day? Are they getting stressed because they need to, or like are they burning out because they're trying to save the world, you know? So we carry a huge responsibility as space enablers, but ecosystem enablers. How can we make like these human connections more holistic, better quality for those that are part of it, meaning the people that are involved in this work? So, question to you: what's because I see we hear, all of us here, we hear the passion behind it in terms of like, this is not working. I mean, hello, if no one else is going to do it, you know what? I'll do it. I'm going to do it. So for you, now that a chapter is ending in terms of the physical space, what do you see moving forward in terms for you, like moving this, because you started something big. Yes, in terms of you both started something like big in terms of yes, this is helping. We see the statistics of our members, our community. What do you want to do with this like light?
Such a good question. So throughout this process, I definitely became an entrepreneur, or discovered that story in my head was BS from the beginning. I think this experience, you know, like obviously, you know, we're in a challenging time right now. You know, we kind of been hit over and over again with a lot of these different things, and those hits that we took were you know, a big reason why we ended up having to close our space. But I think ultimately, you know, I'm a believer in everything happens for a reason. Ultimately, I think that we learned what we needed to know in order to take the next step. So for us, I think where we're looking at this is to have one space in Stockholm is not the way we're going to scale this approach. And in our minds, this approach, this sort of the building blocks or the foundation that we've created here, what we've discovered, is enough to take on and start to scale. So in order to create the impact that we want to have, which is exactly what you said, we want to make this the new norm in work environments, that this is the standard, to create some sort of workers' bill of rights, that when you walk into an office, you should expect to have these 5 core needs met, right? And the ones that we identified when we were at LAM were rest, movement, the ability to focus without so many distractions so you can actually get your work done, the opportunity to grow with a group and individually on things that are both personal and professional, and belonging. And these are the 5 needs that we have at work. And so what we see is taking this and creating a framework so that other companies can adopt this approach, because that's where we're going to get the scale. When companies start to create their workspaces this way, when they start communicating this way and make it a part of the culture, and then once we get to a critical mass, this will become the new norm. Now that is a very, very big vision, but I think it's one that we have to have, because in my mind at least, the human sustainability crisis that we have, and we do have a crisis. We have mental health crisis at alarming levels through all parts of the society, especially when you look at young people between the ages of 18 to 29, especially when you look at women. We have high rates of burnout that cost not only our society and our companies a lot of money, but are extraordinarily damaging for the people who go through a burnout. You know, for people who go through a burnout, I don't know what the actual percentage is, but a very big portion of them never come back to the level that they were before the burnout. You know, their life is permanently, their career trajectory is permanently impacted by this. We have to take this seriously. And in my mind, the human sustainability crisis very closely mirrors the environmental crisis. You know, you have a system, right? You have work, and you can parallel that to our planetary systems that are built on the idea of permanent growth, of everlasting growth, right? The ambition of every business is to grow and grow and grow till when? I don't know, forever? That's the whole idea. And that is the trajectory we're on when it comes to the planet as well. But we have finite resources. We have finite planetary resources, and humans, as the engine of that growth in the market-driven world, they have finite resources too. We cannot continue to prioritize growth at all costs because there are two huge casualties. It is people and it is the planet. We have got to change the way that we think about this and start to adopt a different value system, because otherwise we will sacrifice everything. Because without people and without the planet, there is nothing. And so for me, this is one of the most pressing issues that we face in addition to climate change. And we're not going to change it unless we look at the systems. And so for us, one of the ways to change this is to look at the work environment as a system. And it is a system we can work within, and we can start to change it from the inside out. And once we start prioritizing different things in our work environments, our values start to change. And they start to change from the inside out. Because once we put people in focus, and once we put their well-being in focus in a work environment, and that becomes something that is worthy of spending time on, and that becomes something worthy of talking about and celebrating in our cultures, our values will start to change. We will start to value people more than we value profit. And that those two things can coexist, but there needs to be much more of a balance between them. And the equation has been way too skewed on one side versus the other.
Exactly. We were discussing earlier about how, for example, topics on, let's say for this occasion, gender are a topic in itself, and then, but budgeting or climate action, or it's a separate thing. No, it's everything is intertwined. Everything should be considered in terms of how you approach things. Things have impact on each other. Areas have impact on each other. And actually one of the, Feminicity is one project that we're running with other EU companies, but also we have another one that is called Reintegrate Wellbeing. So this one is EU funded as well, and the whole purpose is to focus on long-term unemployment. So this is the silent pandemic of a lot of people not being able to go back to work or not finding work, but not that there's no work, but rather am I in the right set of mind, but also in the right place to perform, or so, because there has been. And this is focused on burnout, like this silent pandemic. Of course, everything triggered after COVID. Fortunately, there's more awareness about this, the importance of this. There's still a long way in terms of funding, but also on companies having set policies, like internal policies, organizational policies, in terms of what to do if you have burnout. How do I work with my employees to avoid burnout? If they come back to work, how do we create a work environments that not focus on like to avoid burnout, but rather promote well-being in general, overall. So I mean, super important work that you both are doing, and very excited to see how this new the concept of LAM, how do you transcend it moving forward?
Well, I think, just to just add one small thing, I think that the important thing is sort of a shift in the way that we think about it, because traditionally we treat burnout, we don't prevent burnout. And so we have a really big problem of, I have a pill for that, but I don't have the prescription for how to avoid getting there in the first place. And I think that's sort of one of the big things that needs to change. This idea that we have a responsibility to prevent the harm from happening in the first place. We need to build for that. And then I think the second thing is that we've traditionally looked at something like burnout as an individual issue, right? It is, this person is overwhelmed. This person can't handle their workload. This person is stressed. No, everybody is. This person is just about to get sick from it, but everybody is. And I think that one of the, I think it's good that we're even talking about it. Of course, 20 years ago, burnout was not something that we talked about, so we're making progress, but we have to stop looking at burnout as an individual issue, because if you have somebody burning out, you don't have an individual issue, you have a systemic issue. And they're not the only ones being impacted by it, but they might be the only ones who are visibly impacted by it, or impacted by it to the point that they cannot continue to work anymore. But guaranteed, that is the tip of the iceberg. And under the water, you have hundreds more people who aren't sleeping at night, or they're not exercising, they're not eating well. They are in a constant state of fight or flight. They have chronic anxiety. They are having trouble in their interpersonal relationships. All these things that you don't see as maybe an employer, but you have a major problem. So we need to stop looking at it as an individual issue and start looking at it as a systemic issue. We as an organization, we as the employer, need to take serious responsibility for this idea of preventing harm in the first place. And what are the mechanisms and the programs we need to put in place to make sure that we don't get to this point?
Like, why wait until it happens?
I mean,
or why
it's extraordinarily expensive. It costs a company 400,000 kroner when somebody burns out. And then that is a very small part of the impact, because a person burning out, I mean, I don't think we really think about what it actually is. A person burning out is your brain and your body are not able to function anymore. That's burnout. You have worked yourself to a point where you cannot function as a human being. How we can continue to promote a system where that is an eventuality for a large majority of people, for me, is completely unconscionable. And you have to think about the impact on that individual. What does it take to come back from a state where you are not able to function, where your body and your brain can't function? It takes an extraordinary effort. It is a very long path for most people. It's a year and a half, it's 2 years. And you have statistics that are like 50% of people report symptoms of burnout. Those figures are even higher for women. So, I mean, we have this very serious challenge, and we have to look at it as, what are the things that are leading us to this point, and how do we stop that from happening? And we need to do it at a systematic level so that it just becomes a part of our culture, that we're taking care of this, we're doing those preventative actions before this becomes reality.
Absolutely. Super important. And how you mentioned, it's not individual level, it's like this system that we are in, and changes from inside out. So I mean, thank you. I mean, very insightful, because it's how you're saying, like, disproportionately. This is also a gender issue, going back to this aspect of things are not well-being and gender are not separate. This is intertwined, all these different issues. But there's opportunities for it, meaning that, how you're saying, we are having more awareness for it. Little by little, there's more implementation of policies that can, how do you say, like, to upscale or like upgrade